Welcome to all, and thank you for coming to the Minnesota House District 20B and 58B Candidate Forum. My name is Melanie Fries, and I am the Voter Education Chair of the Voter Services Committee of the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls. We will start the candidate forum in a couple of minutes, but before we do, I would like to review some of the forum policies and rules. This candidate forum is free and open to the public. Because of the ongoing pandemic, the 2020 forums are being held online using a Zoom webinar that can host over 1,000 participants. While the audience can watch the forum in real time, audience members' audio and video will be muted throughout the entire forum. Chat functions will not be available. It is the League's policy to tape the entire candidate forum without editing, so that citizens will see the event in its entirety and not just selected scenes or sound bites. This forum is being recorded and will be available online at lwvnorthfieldmn.org tomorrow. We will be asking questions that were submitted in advance, but audience members are also encouraged to submit questions throughout the forum via email. Contact us at lwvnorthfieldmn.org. You may address the question to one candidate, but all other candidates will be given the opportunity to respond as well. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be asked. Those that fall into the same general topic area may be consolidated to allow us to cover as many topics as possible in the allotted time. All questions submitted are the property of the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls. While all candidates were invited to participate in the forum today, Joe Moravicek, a candidate for MN House 20B, declined the invitation and chose not to attend. The League's policy is to allow candidate forums to proceed if at least one candidate is present. I would now like to turn the time over to Pat Johnson, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls, for some opening remarks.
Pat, you need to unmute.
I'll start.
And we need to welcome Mr. Garofalo.
And is Mr. Garofalo, can you hear us? I'm not sure that he can.
Oh, okay. Maybe you just keep going and we'll see if he rejoins.
I'll go on with the script. Maybe he'll rejoin.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, I'll start over again. I'm Pat Johnson, co-president of the League of Women Voters at Northfield and Cannon Falls. I'd like to welcome you to the Minnesota House Districts 20B and 58B Candidate Forum. The 2020 Candidate Forums are hosted by the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls and co-sponsored by the Academic Civic Engagement Office of St. Olaf College, the Center for Community and Civic Engagement at Carleton College, and Northfield Area Chamber of Commerce. We thank the candidates for attending today and our internet audience for viewing. This forum is a public service, providing you with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss important issues face-to-face. The views expressed here today are those of the candidates and not the sponsoring organizations. The League of Women Voters Minnesota is a nonpartisan 501c3 political organization. It encourages informed and active participation of citizens and government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We do not endorse candidates for office or political parties. If you're interested in learning more about the history of the League and our local league, we encourage you to go visit an exhibit about the League, which will be at the Northfield Historical Society through tomorrow, Sunday, September 27th. Unfortunately, there's never enough time to cover all of the issues that are raised. If you feel that your question has not been addressed, please contact the candidate directly after the forum. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mary Carlson, a certified moderator from the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Pat and Melanie. My name is Mary Carlson, and I've been a longtime member of the League of Women Voters. Got trained as a moderator many years ago and found I actually enjoy it, though I get kind of stressed out, as I can imagine the candidates do as well. I will do my best to run a very smooth, efficient, and effective forum today. And I know it's a very strange time for us, and to be together on this platform is really important. So thank you to all the candidates. I also want to thank you for your commitment to public service as demonstrated by your running for public office. We will start the candidate forum with opening statements. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for your opening statement and 1 minute later for your closing statement. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order. Assuming we can hear Mr. Pat Garofalo, he will go first, then Mr. Todd Lippert, then Ms. Sarah Wolf. I have gotten permission to use first names from 2 of the 3 candidates so far, and if Mr. Garofalo weighs in, we can hear from him. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, yay. Oh, how wonderful to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you. And first of all, yes, please, by all means, call me Pat. It might be a little bit confusing. Maybe we'll, or
that's
it's
true.
the other Pat and then me, so that's okay.
The other Pat will keep her mouth shut, won't you, Pat Johnson? Yes, she will. Okay, the closing statements will then be in a random order. The order of answering questions, I will rotate. Candidates will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond to each question. Please note that our wonderful timekeepers, volunteers from St. Olaf, yay, have 30-second and 15-second and stop signs. Take a peek. Can all the candidates see those? Everybody? Good. We hope that most, if not all, of the questions will be submitted by the audience. Please, if you're in the audience, submit your questions during the forum by emailing contact us at lwvnorthfieldmn.org, as you can see on my face there. We also have advanced questions submitted by email to our league. So let's begin with the opening statements, please. First with Mr. Garofalo. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. And first of all, I just want to ask if you can hear me okay, if the audio check is all right. Good, thumbs up, great. Well, I'll do my best to participate in this forum while being fearful of the well-known bad temper that Representative Lippert has. I'll try to contain myself. For those that don't know, that's a joke. Todd Lippert's one of the nicest people at the Capitol. So good afternoon to everyone. Obviously, 2020 is a very trying year. A lot of things are happening. In addition to the normal stresses of a presidential election year, we're dealing with the confluence of many factors. Number one is obviously COVID-19, our state and our nation's response to it, the economic and social pressures that it's putting on people. Secondly is the civil unrest that's been taking place primarily in Minneapolis and St. Paul, the societal, again, state and national responses to that. And then third and finally is the economic distress that is putting onto the families across Minnesota and how we respond to that. So this is I'm serving in my 8th term in the Minnesota House right now. The district I represent includes the city of Farmington as well as portions of rural Dakota and Goodhue counties. And as we're going forward, it's going to take all of us to row the boat to put Minnesota back on track. As we go forward, I look forward to a more in-depth conversation on the specific issues. But again, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, and I look forward to the conversation and the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Todd.
Hi, everyone. I'm State Representative Todd Lippert, and I also want to thank the League for making this conversation possible, and I look forward to the exchange this hour as well. We need a Minnesota that's working for everyone, regardless of race or geography. And I ran for office and I'm running for re-election because I care deeply about small communities. I grew up in a town of 700 people. I've been a pastor in small communities in Wisconsin, and most recently as a senior minister at First United Church of Christ in Northfield. I understand the challenges we face in small towns. I also think the increasing racial diversity that many small communities are seeing is a strength to be embraced. In my time in the legislature, I've been focused on rural issues. So this spring, when the agricultural economy went upside down due to COVID, I worked to draft legislation to extend farmer-lender mediation, which essentially pauses farm foreclosure until December 1st. And I work with Republican leaders in the House and the Senate to get that passed. Caregiving issues across the age spectrum are something that is an issue that's very important to me. I serve as a vice chair of the Long-Term Care Committee in the House. While doing that work, I realized that the Ombudsman for Long-Term Care office in Minnesota was severely understaffed. We have the lowest staffing of any office in the nation. So I worked with Republican Senator Karen Housley to add staffing to that office to make sure that we're caring for our elders, dealing with elder abuse, and providing appropriate resources. That passed, and it's been a key resource for elder abuse and also for dealing with COVID in nursing facilities too. Going forward, I care deeply about the health of rural economies, agriculture and farmers, also climate change as well. So I'm working on a comprehensive soil health bill that'll be good for the bottom line of farmers, good for water quality, and good for the climate as well. So I'll stop there, but I look forward to this conversation this afternoon.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good afternoon. I will echo the thanks for putting this event together. It's been really interesting to try to find ways to connect with voters and to kind of help voters understand who I am as a person and kind of what my viewpoints are. So this is a great opportunity. I'm Sarah Wolf. I am born and raised in Minnesota. I have lived in Farmington since about 2001. My husband and I moved out here and knew right away that we wanted to raise our family in this community. I have 2 teenagers at home who are attending Farmington Public High School. And I just continue to be impressed with the education system here in Farmington and in the surrounding areas, and just the community and the people and the landscape. And we're here now because this is where we want to be. I believe that we have a duty to serve our communities in the ways that we can, and am consistently preaching to my 2 teenagers that, really, unless you're willing to be part of the solution, then really you shouldn't be complaining. And so they quickly reminded me of that when I started complaining about not being able to watch the news, because it just has gotten so negative and so divisive. And just the question kind of becomes, who is the system really serving? And that's kind of where I go in my professional career. I'm kind of have a reputation for bringing diverse perspectives together, for finding that common ground and moving forward, and have recently, had some conversations with teachers here in Farmington who say, some of the behavior that we're seeing from our leaders, just it wouldn't be tolerated in my kindergarten classroom. So I think we need to make sure we're electing more folks who can really work together and make sure that we're addressing the needs of Minnesotans.
Thank you so much. We'll start now with the questions. I'll move between those that have been submitted and those that are being submitted as we speak. Please listen carefully to the order in which we'll answer the questions, but candidates feel free to say, Mary, would you repeat the question, especially if you're the third one to go? I don't mind that a bit. So question number 1 will go in this order: Sarah, then Todd, then Pat. The first question is, what do you think is the 1 or 2 most pressing issues facing your district? And if elected, what will you do to address that or those issues?
Excellent. So I'll tell you, no matter who I talk to in this area, one of the biggest concerns folks have is the culture that is perpetrated by our political system, and seeing themselves not reflected in the conversations and not reflected in the actions and the words of their leaders. And so to me, that's step number 1, is to address the system that sort of is preventing this movement forward and this progress forward in meeting the needs of Minnesotans, because we can't get folks to talk to each other. And I know there's a lot of great stuff happening. And I've heard some really great things from, things that Pat has done, things that Todd is doing, that really, I feel like reflects our communities. But there's so much division over and above that sort of drowns out all of the good things that are happening and really frustrates and angers people. And I really think that we need to use that frustration and anger to move forward together, which is one of the major issues that I'm hearing people are concerned with, along with, affordable healthcare, rural broadband. All of those issues are things we can't start addressing those until we address the climate of our political system.
Thank you. Todd?
Thank you. So I would say that the fact that we're having this forum online rather than in person is pointing to the fact that we're in the midst of a global pandemic right now. And COVID-19 is affecting so many things. We've had over 200,000 deaths in the United States due to COVID, one of the worst death rates in the world, nearly 2,000 deaths in Minnesota. And what's been disappointing to me is that Republicans and Democrats have failed to come together to speak with one voice, to talk about the importance of taking this virus seriously, doing the simple things, wearing masks, social distancing, washing hands, being careful about social situations. I just talked with a gentleman. He said to me, I'm 67 years old and I'm a caregiver for my wife. And I'm terrified to go out because anytime I go out, I might bring COVID home and I don't know if my wife will survive. Now this says a couple things. One, how important it is for us to be thinking of others, and we don't know how the virus might spread or how our actions might stop a chain of transmission. But second, our economy is not going to bounce back until we get the virus under control, because people like this gentleman and others are afraid to go out and aren't spending money in the way that they normally would be. So we need to do everything we can to take this virus seriously, speak together as leaders to encourage that, and get the virus under control.
Thank you. And Pat?
As I said in my opening statement, obviously COVID-19 as well as the civil unrest are the two really big issues. In terms of our response to COVID-19 at both the state and federal level, I thought we did a really good job in Minnesota when things first started. It's an interesting historical fact. If you look back through the news archives, it was actually Republicans in Minnesota who were calling for the suspension of in-person committee hearings at the legislature, as well as supporting a shutdown, even when before it even reached Minnesota. And the initial plan we had in place was a good one. And that was that we had to have some temporary restrictions to, number one, expand the inventory of protective equipment. Number two, to build out that surge capacity for when individuals, when there's going to be a wave of those getting sick, expanding ICU capacity, hospital capacity. And then third and finally is preparing the public to gain knowledge about this virus, how it spreads, and give some time to the medical community to develop some new therapies. Unfortunately, that was over half a year ago. And since then, we've had the same static models in place, the one-size-fits-all approach, restricting areas of our state to the same levels of limits on restaurants and commerce. And so my hope is that going forward, the Governor Walz will return to that collaborative approach that we had when this first began.
Thank you. As is often the case, you've anticipated one of the biggest questions, which was your response to the handling of the pandemic in this state. We can revisit that as needed, but I have a different question now. The order of this one for answers will be Todd, and then Pat, and then Sarah. This is in the area of budget and taxes. Given the current and foreseeable negative impact of COVID-19 on the state's resources, what measures will you support to help balance the state budget?
I think there's no doubt that we have serious conversations about spending in front of us. And I'll be interested in taking a look at spending across the entire state budget. The conversations about spending also go to the tax code. We'll need a balanced approach. So I was just in a conversation with a business owner in Lonsdale who said, was concerned about her property taxes, which makes sense. We had a conversation about that. But then she was outraged that Jeff Bezos has a 1.2% effective tax rate. I was wondering, how can this be? And so we need a tax code that in Minnesota that reflects our values. And we talked about the Trump's tax cuts and how they're just asking less and less of the wealthiest and most powerful corporations in our country, and in the state too. So we need a tax code that reflects our values, that is asking Minnesotans to contribute to the common good according to their ability to pay. When Minnesotans are sacrificing so much due to COVID, it's not too much to ask the wealthiest and the most powerful corporations in the state to pitch in their fair share, protect key services that our state depends on, whether it's schools, supporting people with disabilities, our elders. If we can have this conversation, we can move towards a balanced budget that will really serve Minnesotans.
Thank you. Pat?
Well, in addition to facing a projected budget deficit that's in a multi-billion-dollar range, we have a current budget deficit right now during the current budget cycle. And it's been disappointing that some of the bad habits Governor Walz learned in Washington, D.C., he has imported to Minnesota. Whether we like it or not, deficits are difficult and they require changes in our budgeting. We have to balance our budget in the state of Minnesota, unlike the federal government. And the response that we've had this year, unfortunately, has been to spend more money and to drain our budget reserves. Now, it took many years for us to build up those reserves, and certainly reserves are meant for a rainy day. But this strategy we're seeing deployed right now, just draining the budget reserves, of asking for federal assistance, is not a sustainable long-term strategy. And so the plan that I would outline is that we do three things. Number one, 1/3 of our solution should come from the budget reserves. 1/3 of them should be used what I call RATs, recognized accounting tricks. This is something that both sides of the aisle do to delay payments, accelerate revenues, just in terms of those accounting changes. And then 1/3 should come from spending reductions, new programs that are getting started that we can't afford anymore, reductions in the agency budgets. This is what Democrats and Republicans in other states have done. And so I think that sort of common sense approach is going to help us address the issues of balancing the budget. But make no mistake about it, we have a systemic problem of government growing faster than the private sector, and it's going to need to be addressed with spending reductions as well as those other tools.
Thank you. And Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. I have a tendency to agree with Pat on some of his points, especially that this is kind of a multifaceted approach. When you're talking about, in February projecting a $1.5 billion surplus, now we're $4 million swing the other way, and things are going to continue to change. I think it's a combination of looking at, kind of what Todd was saying, and what is our tax structure, and how are we making sure that those dollars are coming in a fair and equitable way, and then looking at what are the types of programs and what are the social support structures and what are the dollars going out to, and are there ways that we can reallocate or readjust some of those things that are working for our communities, and looking at what is efficient, what is effective, and looking at it from a readjustment standpoint. And again, it's like balancing any budget, right? You're looking at what's coming in, you're looking what's going out, and how can we match that and continue to meet the needs of Minnesotans while being fiscally responsible about how the money is coming in and then how it's being spent.
Thank you very much. Okay, Sarah, ready. The next question, you start, and then Todd, and then Pat, please. And this question is, how will you work to enhance cooperation between the House and the Senate to get more done? And which issue do you think is most important to work on across the aisle? So how will you do it, and which is the most important to work on? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I draw on a lot of my experience as an educator and think about, what are the structures in place that seem to be kind of holding back some of that cooperation? And really it is, some of it is structural. It's kind of how we built the system, and think small things like, I was actually kind of taken aback when I visited the House chamber to walk in and see that the House itself, the chamber, is divided, and things like this to increase that cooperation. If it were my classroom, I would be saying, let's get to know each other, because what I think we're going to find, and I think what has also been recognized here already, is that as Minnesotans, we have a lot of the same values. Everybody wants a great education system. Everybody wants our businesses to be successful. Everybody wants safe and secure communities. And realizing that we're working from the same place with our values, and that the pathways to get there, those are the things that might be different, is really just an opportunity to address issues in a more comprehensive way by including all of the perspectives of stakeholders, and listening to what people are asking for and taking that into consideration. As far as what the most important topic is, I think it's, it can be hard to separate some of these issues from each other, because they're all so interconnected and they all are so reliant on each other, that it's a wholesale need to collaborate.
Thank you. Todd.
One thing that I've learned in my short time in the Capitol is that I feel like trust is the currency of the Capitol. That unless people trust you, it's going to be difficult to get things done. And when trust starts breaking down among the parties, it's extremely difficult to get things done. And so I think it's important for us to be electing leaders who are who have that sort of trust building in mind all the time, and that we're having debates and conversations in ways that can be true to our positions and who we are, but not belittle our opponents, thinking that we need to find ways to work together on this issue, or maybe an issue down the road. And I know I'll have to circle back and have a conversation or relationship with this member at some point. So let's have this conversation in the most respectful way possible. I do a lot of work in the agriculture committee. And so I'm thinking a lot about agriculture right now. And I think there's a lot of possibility for bipartisan work, and there has been in the past. And so we can build on that, both with trying to create more opportunities for local processing. The soil health bill that I was mentioning earlier, it's good for farmers. There's a lot of interest among farmers across party lines because they see it as being good for their bottom line. And then as they step in, they realize, hey, this is good for the environment too. And I can be a part of the climate solution as well. And so I think there's opportunities for different coalitions and relationships to be built in relation to this issue to support farmers in what's good for them. So I look forward to trying to find ways forward on those issues.
Thanks. Pat.
Well, the first thing is that everyone needs to be at the table when we're making decisions. That requires compromise and cooperation. And the worst thing you can do is by putting one political party in total control. So right now we have a DFL governor, and we have a divided legislature. Republicans control the Senate, DFLers control the House. We're the only divided legislature in the nation, all 50 states. And the worst thing we could do is take the DFL and have them be in total control. In fairness, I would say the same thing about Republicans. You don't want to have one party with total control of our state. It reduces collaboration. It marginalizes those groups that need to be sitting at the table to help solve what are very difficult problems. In the last 30 years in Minnesota, there's only been 2 years where we've had total unified party control. That was 2013 and 2014, and it was universally recognized as a disaster and not something we want to go back to. So regardless of who people are supporting for president, whether it's Donald Trump or someone else, I would ask voters to take seriously the consequences of giving the DFL total control of our state. In terms of the issues that we would work on going forward, center has to be right now public safety. We absolutely have to stop what is seen as the breakdown of public safety, primarily in Minneapolis. They've had 61 homicides this year, and it's only September. There's been a large spike in violent crime, and we have to work together to stop that decay and to make sure it doesn't spread to surrounding communities. That's going to take all of us at the table.
Thank you. I'm making decisions here about questions. Pat, you'll be the first one to answer this next one, then Sarah, then Todd. I think we'll stay a little bit on the criminal justice topic. Let's go to gun control. Do you support red flag laws that allow a member of a household to petition a judge to temporarily remove firearms from a person who may pose a danger to themselves or others? Please provide your reasons.
So currently in Minnesota, there's if you're going to take someone's gun away from them, there's a process to do that. There's due process to allow that. And so the problem with the current red flag legislation, so-called red flag legislation that's been proposed, is that it takes guns away from people without that due process. This is something that can prevent a victim of domestic violence from having the tools to protect themselves in situations like that. So the current bill that has gone forward at the legislature, I've been very much opposed to. It's a bad idea. Requiring the government to have access to medical records to find out if they're suitable or not. That's a very dangerous, slippery slope that candidly violates HIPAA. So I don't like that. But to be clear, no one in Minnesota is in favor of crazy people having guns. No one wants that. So we do have laws that are currently in place that allow us the opportunity to do that. If people can point out flaws in the current laws that need to be modified or adjusted to make sure that the due process of those involved are protected, while at the same time making sure that those who could be a harm to themselves or to others, that we have those in place, we can take a look at those. But the current bills that are being floated to the legislature, they're not really serious. And even if the Democrats were in total control, that bill would never become law because of the flaws in it.
Thank you. Sarah.
So some of what Pat's talking about, I think are valid points, and that we need to ensure that if there is those processes are in place, that those processes are being followed. And I would kind of add to that to say that when we talk about sensible gun control and making sure that guns are used safely and owned safely and purchased safely, there are other components to that as well, to ensure that our communities are safe. Talking about, emotional regulation for families and kids from the time they're little, making sure that those structures are in place to address the needs of humans, and to make sure that those pieces are also addressed. It goes beyond just telling folks when they should or shouldn't have guns. It goes into that due process that Pat's talking about, and making sure that there's a process in place for those things, and educating folks on safe gun storage, and ensuring that they can't buy guns without following that due process, which is kind of what we're seeing with some of the holes in those universal background checks for folks. Those aren't fulfilling the need to make sure that that due process is being followed.
Thank you. And then Todd.
I do support the red flag law that we passed off the House floor the last two sessions, and I voted in favor of that bill, and I'll vote in favor of it again. States like Florida have this bill. They put it in place after Parkland. There are law enforcement officials there that have talked about how often they've used it, how useful they find it, and have said, we can't imagine not having a bill like this available to us. As a pastor, I walk with people who are going through mental health crisis, and there's definitely a time where you don't want them to have a firearm available to them. And so I think it only makes sense that when someone is seen to be a danger to themselves or others, that there's a clear process that's put in place to remove them from a dangerous situation, and others from a dangerous situation too. So I think this bill makes sense. Other places in the country have found it to be useful to save lives. I think it would be good for Minnesota too.
Thank you. For this next question, Todd, you'll go first, and then Pat, and then Sarah. This is switching to a number of questions about the environment that we've put together. So assuming you are elected, what immediate steps would you take to pass legislation to protect our environment, considering things like copper nickel sulfide mining in Minnesota, environmental impact statements on feedlots, electric vehicles, and so on? What immediate steps would you take to pass legislation to protect the environment?
I'm in the House Climate Action Caucus, and I'm a leader in that caucus. And so we've been focused on the work we need to do in Minnesota to meet emissions goals. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says we have 10 years to avoid the worst effects of climate change. So we need to be thinking economy-wide about reducing emissions. In the utility sector, we need to pass a 100% renewable energy goal, clean energy goal by 2050. In transportation, we need to be electrifying the transportation system. I had a bill to put more electric vehicle charging stations across the whole state. In the built environment with houses and buildings, we need to reduce, we need an energy efficiency program to make sure we're reducing energy bills, reducing emissions there. And then we need, with forestry and agriculture together, we need forestry to be the biggest carbon sink it could possibly be. and we need to reduce emissions in agriculture. So I've talked some about soil health focus in agriculture. I think with forestry, we can be thinking about how do we manage private and public forests with climate in mind? How do we use urban forestry as a key resiliency strategy to climate change to make sure that we're taking the advantage of the cooling effects that can happen with a strong urban forest across our state?
Thanks. Pat?
Well, right now, the state of Minnesota, we spend a lot of money on cleaning our water, keeping it clean. It's a pristine resource, particularly not just for recreation, but also for agriculture, for drinking. So right now, you've got the money that's in the constitutionally dedicated legacy fund, a sales tax increase that was passed a little about 12 years ago. You have the money from the lottery. In addition, you have general fund resources. So the state of Minnesota already right now is providing a lot of resources and spending a lot of money on the issue of water. And one of the things we can do a better job of is taking some of those existing resources and providing them to local communities to upgrade their existing wastewater treatment plants. Many small communities across Minnesota, their plants were designed when we had lower standards. And now with the mandates of the federal government and the state government, those plants are reaching the end of their life cycle, and we need to provide additional resources to these communities to be able to upgrade those facilities. Absent that, they simply do not have the tax base to support these burdens. We're talking about assessments of 5 digits, 10,000 in excess in many of these communities with senior citizens, fixed incomes. And so we need to prioritize those resources in there. As an electric vehicle car owner for the last 6 years, I can tell you that electrification is happening. There's some good news happening there, but my time's expired. But I think you're going to continue to see in Minnesota the market moving towards the passenger vehicle fleets going towards additional electrification.
Thank you. And Sarah?
Yeah, so I think there's a big opportunity here to work with a lot of the large corporations and other companies that we have in Minnesota that have a very large carbon footprint when it comes to our environment, and working with them on environmental standards around carbon emissions and that sort of thing. And we've seen a real movement, I think, towards things like renewable energy generally. We're seeing that pop up more and more in the private sector as far as homes becoming solar powered homes, and companies who are really getting behind some of these green standards as far as what they can do in their communities to sort of influence the impact that we're having on our earth. And I think this stretches too to more straightforward things like how we package products, how we use products, and things like single-use plastic and all of those things that kind of gunk up the earth. And at some point, we're all going to be buried in trash if we don't figure out ways to recycle and the 3 R's, right, of schoolhouse rocks. We reduce, reuse, and recycle. And so those are the policies and things that we need to be looking into kind of as a wholesale, both in the corporate sector and as far as private ways to contribute to those environmental standards.
Well, this is a moment for everybody to breathe and for me to say you're being very concise and helpful, and I am very happy when I don't have to interrupt you. So thank you so much for doing that. This is a little bit of a different kind of question. When you are in the legislature faced with these very, very, very difficult decisions, what decision-making process do you go through when you're faced with these hard choices? I'm sorry, I didn't tell you the order. Sarah, Todd, Pat, what decision-making process do you go through when faced with hard choices?
So my first and foremost is to talk to the people that know. As a single human, I can't know everything about everything. So I think it's a good practices around getting data, getting the perspectives of the stakeholders, and sometimes, depending on the urgency of the situation, that has to happen very quickly. Other times there is an opportunity to really talk to community members, talk to the stakeholders, and bring those multiple perspectives together to make sure that those issues are getting a very collaborative, very comprehensive look, and making sure that those solutions that we're putting forward and looking to put in place for all Minnesotans or certain Minnesotans are really meeting their needs. And you can't do that if you don't talk to the people who are affected. You have to talk to those stakeholders. And there are multiple perspectives for every issue out there. We have 5.5 million people in Minnesota and who likely have 5.5 million different viewpoints of what will be helpful and supportive to them. And that can be quite a process to try to gather that information, but I think it can be done, and I think it should be done. Whether or not you're, Republican or Democrat, your voice should be heard, no matter who your representative is.
Okay, thank you. Then Todd.
Yes, like Sarah, I seek out as many conversations as possible. So have conversations with constituents who are impacted by this. I pay attention to the emails that are coming in, the calls that are coming in, but also are seeking out conversations with constituents to just keep my ears open. I'm also paying very close attention to colleagues in the legislature on both sides of the aisle that I admire and trust. And I want to hear their perspective on these issues, and I take that into account. And then I'm searching my own values, asking, how does this lead to a more equitable Minnesota? How is this impacting the most vulnerable in our state? Is this leading us towards a more just state that's truly working for everyone across race, across geography? And if the legislation can meet that test, then I'll vote for it and feel settled in my decision to do so.
Pat.
It's a really good question, and I think one of the first things that's important for legislators to do is to recognize that these conversations don't begin the moment we arrive at the legislature. There is a history. And so taking an examination, a thorough examination of the money that's currently being spent, the programs that are currently in place, the policies that are currently in place, that's really, before you make any changes in law, that's the first place to start with. The second place that you do is to recognize that you do need to have stakeholder buy-in and stakeholder agreement. Whether Todd and I agree or disagree on something, we recognize that there's a process by which a bill becomes a law. And that committee process is going to have many stops. It's going to have a large amount of diverse stakeholders, people who maybe agree with you on this issue, but perhaps on the next issue, they're going to disagree. So establishing those relationships of transparency, honesty, and just not surprising people, those are really important factors. Third and finally, I would say is that it's just really important for legislators to seek out opinions and ideas they disagree with. If I could just put a plug in for something that's it's on Netflix right now. There is a 1.5-hour movie called The Social Dilemma. It is by tech executives, former tech employees who've worked in social media. And it talks about some of the confirmation bias that our technology platforms are building into our steady news streams and providing us with almost alternate realities. And for those who are viewing this program, for anyone considering running for public office, I would really encourage you to watch that. Again, it's The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix. So hopefully that doesn't violate any League of Women Voters rules on a plug. I am not compensated by Netflix, nor do I make any money off it, but I just think it's a really important information tool for everyone to sit down and watch, preferably with their family.
Thank you. This is why we say this entire forum will be put on the web in the way it is, the full thing. We don't cut, we don't say anything about what people might be saying, so we appreciate whatever people are saying. Let's move to an issue that's on the minds of, I would say, all Minnesotans, and candidates in earlier forums have said this is what they hear when they're on the path of talking with the people they want to represent, and that is healthcare. So the question goes in this order. Pat, you get to go first this time, then Sarah, then Todd. The question is, what is the role of the state government, if any, to ensure that accessible and affordable health care is available for its residents? And what legislation about this might you introduce or support?
Yeah, so we could spend over an hour just talking about one facet of the entire healthcare debate. So I'll try to summarize complex policy as quickly as I can by recognizing the three things people want out of healthcare. Number one, they want access. Number two, they want high quality care. And number three, they want it to be affordable. The healthcare budget of our state and federal government have been growing at a rate far faster than the rate of inflation. There's many factors for doing this, but clearly you cannot have one or two of those three items. You have to do all three at the same time, whether it's at the federal level or at the state level. And so there is a movement right now where people are hoping to put more people out of the private health insurance market into the public health insurance market on the government side of things. The problem with that is that the reimbursement rates in the public sector are far lower. So if Todd and I both go to the same hospital for the same procedure, I have private sector health insurance. Let's say Todd has a publicly subsidized plan. Even though we're having the exact same procedures, those hospitals are not going to be reimbursed at the same rate. In many respects, the private health plans are subsidizing the public health plans. Now, just cutting public sector enrollment is not in and of itself enough. What you have to have is a growing economy, growing prosperity, so more people are getting their health insurance from the private sector. But again, that's the best I can do in 60 to 90 seconds. It's a much more complicated facet of that, and it's something that we have to, only solutions that'll work are the ones we work on together, and that means having both Democrats and Republicans in elected office.
Thank you. And Sarah?
I agree. This is a really complex issue, and admittedly, it's something that I have a lot to learn about. But I think when I talk to folks, it's the same, it's those same things, right? It needs to be accessible, needs to be high quality, and needs to be affordable for people. And one of the things that kind of comes to mind right away is in regards to the complexity of healthcare is, I feel like I need a PhD in healthcare to figure out my bill. And we know that, 30% of the dollars in healthcare go towards administration and figuring out, who pays what bill and coordinating all these different benefits. And so those are areas that I think we can look at too, is kind of addressing how our providers and how our insurers and how they all work together in some of those processes. I had an opportunity to talk to some healthcare professionals from one of our local healthcare agencies that's really on all angles working on those types of issues, both from the end of let's simplify it enough that we can make sure that people are getting the care that they need, it's affordable. And frankly, one of the best ways to lower the cost of healthcare is to have a healthier population. And so it goes hand in hand with a lot of those other things that we're talking about as far as social infrastructure and getting people access to the services that they need.
Thank you. And Todd?
So I think government has a key role to play in delivery of healthcare services, and that it's only by expanding government programs that we have the power together to hold the true drivers of cost accountable, which is the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. So one story I've been thinking about a lot is a conversation with a mom. She was talking about how her family doesn't have access to health insurance right now. They were on Minnesota Care. She and her husband both got jobs that were paid a little bit more, but then they didn't have access to an affordable plan. The only plan they had access to had an $1,800 a month premium with a $12,000 deductible. So that's $30,000 out of pocket before any benefits received. So what we've passed in the House DFL, what I would advocate for again, is expanding Minnesota Care. So allowing families like this to be able to buy into Minnesota Care at an affordable price, have access to insurance that's really insurance. It'd be good for this family, for farmers, for small business owners, for people who work for small employers, and it would help Minnesotans across the state.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this will be our last question before we have final statements. It's a different kind of question. We call it a lightning round. Todd, you'll go first. Pat, you'll go second. Sarah, you'll go third. What 3 words would describe your characteristics that will make you a strong public servant in the legislature in Minnesota? 3 words.
Listener, compassionate, collaborative.
Pat?
Not Todd Lippert. No, I'm just kidding.
Not Todd Lippert. That is 3. I'll let you keep going.
I'm just kidding. I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. I would say independent, collaborative, and persistent.
I'm going to tag on to that independent. I think that's an important one. Honest and compassionate.
Thank you very much. It is time for our closing statements. You each have 1 minute to summarize for us your qualifications for public office. I would ask us to go in this order, please. Sarah first, Todd second, Pat third, and keep an eye on the timekeepers. Thank you very much.
I would say it's really up to the voters to address the climate and culture of the political landscape right now. And so it's really important to get to know the candidates that are running, especially for local office. Get to know us and then our views and viewpoints. And once you know that, you can make those decisions on who is a reflection of your viewpoints or your values. And insist on electing folks who can collaborate, who are presenting whole truths, and who are willing to work really hard to include all of those perspectives that are important to making those collaborative, comprehensive decisions.
Thank you. Todd.
Thanks. I want to thank Pat and Sarah for the exchange this afternoon and the league again too. We need leaders that can bring us together across race and geography right now. We need leaders that can help build trust within our communities and between citizens and the state legislature too. Unfortunately, it's no secret this election cycle that we have some politicians that are intentionally trying to divide us by race and geography to win an election, stoking racial fears intentionally. And we know this isn't good for us. We need leaders that can help us see our shared humanity, see the challenges that we face together across our differences, and help us come together. As a pastor, I've always sought to earn the trust and respect of those I serve. And as a state legislator, I seek to do the same. So I hope to earn your trust and earn your vote.
Thank you. And Pat.
I too would like to thank Sarah and Todd for participating. Minnesota faces some pretty big changes. One of the effects of COVID-19 is that we are going to see a fundamental restructuring of how and where we work at. And the business models that currently exist that revolve around hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans driving into Minneapolis and St. Paul, purchasing goods and services while they're at work and then returning home. That world is gone. And we've made a lot of decisions in our state, a lot of investments based on that model. And so as disruptive as that is, trying to preserve yesterday's legacy model is not going to support us going forward. What we can do is we can embrace the change that will be happening as more people are working via long distance commute. We can embrace the change of recognizing that as we have the amount of corporate real estate reduced, that we can revitalize that and turn it into housing and present opportunities. But the only way this stuff happens is if we work together. And we need to have both Democrats and Republicans in elected office to accomplish that. So my hope is that after this election, we will see that shared government working together in a Minnesota tradition. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, thank you all. We didn't get to all the questions, as you can imagine. So for the audience, if we didn't get to yours, please do contact these candidates directly. They are easily findable. Again, I would like to remind you that the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters and its co-sponsors. Sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement of any candidate from the League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls. And now for our closing, Voter Education Chair of the League's Voter Service Committee, Melanie Fries, who has done enormous amount of work for these forums. Thank you, Melanie.
The League of Women Voters of Northfield and Cannon Falls, Academic Civic Engagement Office of St. Olaf College, Center for Community and Civic Engagement at Carleton College, and Northfield Area Chamber of Commerce would like to thank our internet audience for viewing, and St. Olaf students for helping with the timing. We would especially like to thank our candidates for being part of the democratic process by running for office and being willing to serve our community. The League also researches issues important to our members and to the health of our communities. If you are interested in learning more about what we do and how you can make a difference, please visit us at lwvmn.org. Membership is open to both men and women 16 and older, age 16 and older. You can find more information about candidates and voting at mnvotes.org and lwvmn.org. Links to all the candidate forums and additional voter information can be found at our local website, lwvnorthfieldmn.org. Again, thank you for coming, and remember to vote.